Good morning. It's Tuesday, August 30th, 2016. And today's 6 minute sermon is on the topic, did Jesus create religion? Did Jesus create churches? Did Jesus create religion? Did Jesus create churches? The answer is no. I can give you evidence in the Old Testament where man created religion, man created churches. I'm talking about the Christian religion. I'm not going to talk about any other religions, so I don't want people getting all upset. I'm talking about Christianity, and I'm going to stay in the New Testament with Jesus, okay? So let's make sure we do this, all right? But even in the New Testament, there were synagogues. Remember this, okay? In the New Testament, there were more than just churches. Jesus did not create, during his ministry, during his life, he did not create one church. He did not create one religion. He created nothing. He just did the Father's will. And he is supposed to be our example. Isn't that what they teach you in church? Then where did the religion come from? Where did the church come from? People have always had a need to be like the world. Every time the world changed, isn't it interesting how things changed in the church, even just a little bit, to match the world? Does that make any sense? Shouldn't the opposite be true? The world become more like the church? But that's not going to happen because the church and religion is secular. It's man-made. It is designed, in my opinion, to help control the population for the secular world, for the government. What is my evidence? There was a conspiracy between the leaders of the synagogue and the Roman government conspired to kill Jesus. A relationship between religion and government, politics. There's always been a relationship between religion and government to control the population. And I'm going to let that go because there's no need to go any further. This is not about conspiracy. This is about the evidence that shows Jesus was not for religion. Jesus was not for churches. Okay? Who created the church? Who created the religion? Man did. The same as they did in the Old Testament, they're doing the same now. The people who came out of the synagogues, who knew religion, created churches. And who did they follow? They followed the revelation. Churches were made from revelation. The revelation that was presented to them by the disciples of the testimony of Jesus Christ. What Jesus sent the disciples out to do. The disciples did not create the religion. It's in the Bible. It was the people. So some followed the testimony of Matthew or the teachings of Matthew. Some followed the teachings of Paul, Luke, and so on. All the disciples. Okay? And they created churches out of these moments, out of this revelation. Because when the disciples moved to the next town, they didn't have anyone there to teach them. So they thought. Because the disciples taught them that they should follow God. But they chose not to. Why? It wasn't popular to follow a God that did not have any physical stature on earth. He was not an idol. He was not a human. He was none of that. He was in us. The church was in us. The testimony was in us. God was in us. And that wasn't enough. It wasn't popular in society. Society had statues. They had buildings. They were in with the government. But God said, come and separate yourself from this government, from this world. Attach yourself to my kingdom, to my world. That is the testimony of Jesus. Am I anti-religion, anti-government, anti-this? No. If you're going to give yourself to God, then give yourself to God. If he says, follow me in my kingdom, follow him in his kingdom. If he says, no religion, no churches, you are the true church, then no religion, I'm the true church, just like you. If he says, I will teach you the new covenant, then let him teach you. If he says, call no one teacher but me, call no one teacher but him. If he says, call no one rabbi but him, call no one rabbi but him. I mean, just follow what he needs you to follow. And you won't be concerned whether or not the world has a relationship with religion and church and statues. You won't be concerned about that because you'll just be concerned about doing God's will. And that's what I believe you should be concerned with. So keep in mind when you read your Bible that the disciples never created church. Jesus never created church. It was the people. They did the same thing in the Old Testament. Same thing in the New Testament. They wanted to be like this world. This is why church seems to always change. Right now, church is dealing with a money issue. Very little of the testimony of Jesus is actually being preached. They need to ask God to give you more money, that you give them more money. I don't believe God's going to give them, me or anyone else, more money to give the church more money because it's religion. I believe God is moving away from religion. He's moving away from church and going back to the true standards, which is in us, because our wills are starting to line up with God's wills. And if our will continue to line up with God's will, then guess what? There won't be a need for a church building or for a religion.